Hello, my name is Kiriath, and today we are going to have a little chat about that there Eisenhorn TV show, what has been announced by Games Workshop last week. Now, yes, I realise we are a little bit late off the starting line for this, but I had some horrendous tech issues last week because this lad here decided to fail catastrophically on me and wreck the PC to the point where it wouldn't even boot, and it was a right faff trying to find out which hard drive it was. There's 8 in there. And this is one of them. And could I work out which one was which? Absolutely not. Did it screw things up royally, unplugging shit and plugging it back in constantly? Yes, it absolutely did. And on top of that, this also had all of my documents on it, including a bunch of pictures, which I'd really rather not have lost. But there you go. Back up regularly. That's my message to you. It's fine. We're back in it. It's okay. We're going. It's good. Eisenhorn. So, we've seen quite a lot of reactions at this point to this news. I mean, as I say, this was announced last week. It's in development. That means that it is not anywhere close to being ready. There is a handy little chart that was on the Warhammer community site, so you can see exactly what that means, which I'll put in the link in the description down below. And to be honest, it could be years before we actually see anything of this. It could well all go through smooth sailing, not an issue, and go straight forward. I mean, some of the people involved, the dude who is responsible for the Man in the High Castle is like on board. It's his thing. That by itself is pretty good news. But then again, if something is in development, it means it's going to be a little while before we see actually anything concrete come out of it. So for those who are like, yes, let's go right now, you're going to have to wait quite a bit, I suspect. We're not going to discuss specific plot or story elements in this, okay? Because there are people who will not have actually read the books yet. You need to go and read the books, obviously, especially before it actually comes out, whenever that turns out to be. But make sure you go and read them, because they're good. Instead, we're going to talk about, essentially, the different ways that this could both work and not work. Because this is one of those situations whereby, I say one of those situations, most situations like this, it could be great, or it could be decidedly not so great. Now, I'm erring on the side of cautious optimism. I feel like there are certain elements that will absolutely translate to TV perfectly well. One of which being the actual world itself, or at least the look, the feel of Warhammer 40k. Warhammer 40k is quite a diverse universe in a way. There's lots of different planets, there's lots of different, I guess biomes would be the word. There's alien creatures, alien cultures, there's, a million different imperial worlds, all of which have slightly different variations of society, of the way that they interact, but they all have something in common, which is, of course, the Imperium itself. Actually capturing the air of 40k shouldn't be too difficult, because there is such a huge wealth of information regarding so many different places. I mean, when I say the Imperium is diverse, if you look at just the Space Marine legions themselves, not even the chapters, the legions, the Iron Warriors are not like the Emperor's Children. The Emperor's Children are not like the Ultramarines. The Ultramarines are nothing like Raven Guard. Raven Guard are nothing like Salamanders. If you take that and then extrapolate it out to encompass an entire human civilization spread across, millions of worlds, you're going to have a lot of different stuff to play with. But the thing is, it can all be essentially tweaked to be 40k appropriate, just by the tone of the place that you're dealing with. The one thing that 40k has in just buckets is grim, dark hopelessness, which is not something that you want to overstress, because otherwise then it just gets a bit depressing and a bit naff. But you can easily incorporate all those different things that make the Imperium what it is, throwing in things like, just architecture. The Imperium has a particular style which is very well documented and has plenty of artwork to support it. The Imperium uses very distinct methods of travel, which again, very well documented. There's lots of artwork for it. The actual physical look and feel of Warhammer 40k is so well established at this point that I genuinely don't think there will be any issue translating that onto a screen. We just have so much lore to go off, and so many drawn examples, and so many very detailed descriptions that, despite the difference world from world, it is all unmistakably 40k, and it all has that same overarching feel to it. There's a lot to be said as well for things like the strength of the casting. I mean, that's something that I doubt we'll hear anything about for a little while at this point. There are multiple people who'd be really good for it, but that's one of those things whereby I think it's probably going to be very easy to look at whatever choice is made. I've seen Mark Strong thrown around a lot, which I think I actually kind of agree with. It's going to be very easy to look at that and go, no, I don't think that would work. But we've also had a lot of examples whereby there's been an assumption that a particular actor wouldn't work in a particular role, and then they absolutely have. The classic example, obviously, is Heath Ledger being the Joker, which became such a ridiculously, character-defining interpretation of that every time anyone even talks about that, the first thing you always read is, yeah, but it won't be as good as, and it just starts off like that every single time. As long as the person who is taking that role understands the nature of the character, it should probably be fine. The fact that they've focused on Eisenhorn and a more human story is, I think, for a start, the best way to go for an initial kind of jump into I would suggest a high-profile TV show. Much though I would genuinely love nothing more than an entire series or a whole film of Space Marines beating the ever-loving shit out of each other, that might not actually work that well as an initial introduction to 40k, because that's something else that this is going to be. This series is going to be like an initial introduction to 40k for a lot of people, and that by itself is going to make it a little bit daunting and a little bit tricky, because there is one thing that I think is going to have potential to piss off people who already enjoy the franchise while simultaneously getting new people involved in it, and that's the interpretation of essentially the underlying morality of Warhammer 40k to begin with, which is that there aren't any good guys in 40k. There's not really anything in the way of, your upstanding citizen. I mean, maybe on an individual cases, but the morality of the universe is quite far detached from everything else. You can't really argue that the Imperium, for instance, are the good guys. You can kind of argue that Chaos are the bad guys, but then Imperium aren't much better in many, many ways. And a character like Eisenhorn is not technically a good guy either. Just because they're fighting for one specific side, and that one specific side is, say, for the survival of humanity, that doesn't necessarily mean that that is a good person doing good things. That's going to be the thing that I think is going to be the trickiest to handle. How do you approach an audience with the idea that you are essentially rooting for someone who is not technically a good guy, but compared to everyone else, is kind of doing the right thing by what they believe, even if, when you're looking at it, what you believe, you absolutely would not count as doing the right thing. It's a weird position to try and take, and I think that's going to be the actual biggest thing. In a way, I'm not worried about them nailing the aesthetic of Warhammer 40k, because I think we have enough that you could do that with a minimum of research at this point, to be honest. There's so much lore, there's so much background. I'm not too worried about who ends up actually playing the character himself, because God knows there are enough decent actors out there. It would be hard pressed to get someone who is completely worthless, and if it has a big name attached already, which it does, then that kind of increases the scope for getting someone who would be, perfect for it. In terms of storyline, in terms of plot, there's things going to change. Yeah, they're going to have to, because books don't really translate one-to-one to TV. But again, we have this established series of tales, we have these established storylines, we have these established plots that, whilst they might need to be tweaked, are still right there and ready to go. The biggest thing, I honestly think, is going to be introducing the fact that you have this universe whereby there are no good guys. There is no kind of perfect outcome. There is not technically a winner in Warhammer 40k. That's not the way the universe is set up. The universe is set up for perpetual conflict. The universe is set up in such a way that you don't have that distinct, like, opposite in morality between different factions. That's just not the way the universe is. That's the only bit I'm worried about translating onto a screen, actually translating into a TV show, because even with things like Game of Thrones, where the way it's presented in the books is not quite the same as it's presented in the TV show. You know, you definitely have one side that is a bit more morally upstanding than the other. Like, the difference between the Starks and the Lannisters in the TV show is, I think, a bit different to the way it's presented in the books. Even in that instance where it's technically just different houses vying for power, there is still a bit of a line drawn in the sand. And you can't really do that with 40k without upsetting the people who are already invested, without, you know, making people feel as though it's not being represented properly. At the same time, if you go straight in with everyone's an arsehole and there's no one to root for, the vast majority of people are not going to feel that that's particularly relatable, and they're not going to be that interested. It's a difficult line to tread, and that's the thing that I'm kind of most interested about seeing whether it's possible to introduce the concept of a universe as grim and unforgiving as 40k, while still retaining enough of a likeable personality that people feel they want to root for it. More than anything, I think I'm just interested to see what happens with this. I am being cautiously optimistic. I am thinking that actually, for the most part, it could well be pretty damn good. But there are elements to it that are going to be very tricky to translate properly, and it's going to be a balancing act between creating something that is palatable and enjoyable for people who are not, like, die-hard 40k fans, and creating something that is still true enough to the original material and to the universe itself that it does make the die-hard 40k fans happy. That is a really difficult line to tread, honestly. That's the thing that is going to be the most interesting to see out of it. Whether it's possible to actually have a foot in, like, on both sides of that line and still maintain enough of either side to make it good for both, if that makes sense. I'm looking forward to seeing it. I'm looking forward to seeing what they do. I'm looking forward for more news for it, and just seeing how the development of it goes, because this is a fucking big step. Just for Games Workshop, for the hobby as a whole, for 40k as a whole. It's been slowly inching its way further into other franchises. It's been kind of spreading its influence, with a lot of effort from Games Workshop. It's not like it's happened completely by chance. They have been trying to push 40k out, especially into other realms, into other areas. And a TV show is a big gamble to take, but with the amount of good stuff we have in terms of writing for 40k, there is a lot to choose from. And I think actually Eisenhorn is an excellent choice for the first 40k TV show. I mean, it could be that they've got more stuff in the works, so there's more stuff they're going to announce. But I would hope that it does actually mean that this is the very first one, that it'll be the first one out, because I think it has enough of everything that you'd see from kind of existing shows, whilst also keeping the potential to be, like, uniquely 40k. It's good. The news is good. Whether the end product winds up being good is something completely different, but we're going to have to wait quite a long time to actually find out whether that is the case or not. And in the meantime, we've just got to look forward to it and see how things go in terms of its development. It's going to be interesting. At the very least, it's going to be interesting. Anyway, that turned out to be longer and more rambly than I meant it to be, which is every video on this channel, so I don't know why I act surprised every time. Let me know what you think about the Eisenhorn news in the comments down below. Is there anyone you particularly want to see in the role? Is there anything that you're worried about? Is there anything that you think they guarantee to do well? Let me know in the comments. In the meantime, feel free to click all the things, Patreon, video subscribe, all that shit. There is also an affiliate link in the description if you're going to buy Warcry. which of course most of you are because you're sensible like me, or alternatively you just have no respect for your bank account, also like me, then use that affiliate link if you're in Europe, because that'll give you some money off it. It'll give something a little bit to me as well, and it's just a way to support the channel without actually doing anything extra other than buying shit you were already going to buy. So it's there if you want it, you don't have to use it. If there's a local game store near you that's stocking it, go there instead, because you need to support those and you need to keep those open. That's always the number one. If it's going to be there, go and get it from there. That's the golden rule. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I will see you for the next one. Toodaloo.